Good afternoon, everyone. As always, my name is Dan Maloof, Senior Director of Product here at Airlines. Excited to be hosting this week's tech briefing. As a quick refresher for any new folks on the line, the purpose of these 30-minute briefings is for our rotating cast of IANS faculty members to dive into the relevant InfoSec news stories of the week and provide you with some specific actionable guidance to take back to your teams. With that as a backdrop, I'm thrilled to be joined today by two IANS faculty rock stars, Wolf Gorlick and Jessica Hebenstreit. Wolf is the Chief Information Security Officer for Michigan's Oakland County, and Jessica is Senior Director of Corporate Security for Quorum Software, which provides software for the oil and gas industry. Wolf and Jessica, thanks so much for joining us always.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, let's dive into the agenda for today. Packed agenda as always. First, MOVEit's back in the news. So some research or some reporting came out yesterday about more data leaks stemming from the last year's MOVEit breaches. So that kind of an interesting plot twist there. Some more info. We'll talk a little bit through that. After that, we're going to discuss how North Korean hackers are targeting financial institutions with malware that affects Mac OS. And finally, we're going to take a look at the TSA's new proposed cybersecurity rules for pipelines and railroads, plus, what that means going forward for other critical industries as well. So obviously a lot of ground to cover today. Jessica, I know you were the one who sort of alerted us to the MOVEit story.
Yeah.
Tell us what's going on here? What's the latest here? Why are we talking about MOVEit again?
Yeah. And so what I think is funny is I think I was on the original tech briefing when we were
Yeah,
talking
I'm
about the
sure you were.
initial
Yeah.
move it brief. So, full circle. For those of you that may not remember, back in the middle of 2023, there was this vulnerability that was found in the MOVEit platform, and it was being actively exploited. And at the time, we knew of like British Airways having problems, some other like payroll processors, that kind of thing. And basically, MOVEit is used to move data between like yourself and one of your third-party processors or vendors or something, right? So, that that happened back in 2023. Well, late last week, or maybe even over the weekend, I don't remember which. It was leaked out on one of these forums, a bunch of data from the MOVEit breach. And so there's this hacker that goes by Nameless. Not sure if they were involved in the original breach and gaining this data, but regardless, they had it. It was validated to be, authentic, and it contained information about different companies' workforce. So employee names, which and titles, which could kind of give an idea of like org structures for some of these companies, cost center codes, so on and so forth. And it wasn't a full leak of all of the data, but the what was leaked included information about, I mean, just giant companies, right? Amazon, HSBC, US Bank, Canada Post, Schwab, Lenovo, Bristol Myers Squibb. The list goes on and on. So these are, very large companies that's multinational. It really speaks to the fact that a lot of our IR folks are used to dealing with an incident that lasts days, maybe weeks, right? And then we tie it up, we put a bow on it, we say it's been contained, it's been remediated, we do lessons learned, and then we kind of continue on. A lot of our teams and our processes aren't really set up to monitor and then respond basically to these kind of longer term breaches and leaks that are happening now with some of these things. And so I think it's really an opportunity for us to go back and look at our playbooks, look at our IR plans, and determine if is there additional monitoring we can put in place here to think about this, to detect it, and what are we going to do to respond to it, and how do we do that ongoing monitoring of these kinds of things. So that's kind of my big takeaway about it. But Wolf, I'd love to know what you think.
The time side is really intriguing. So I'm glad you pulled that out. I fight that all the time with like BitSite, where I'll get alert like your company data has been leaked. And it is a packaging of a repackaging of a repackaging of a breach that happened, months to years ago. So I think you're spot on to think about how we, respond and track and act for these resurgences. It is interesting that this person put out the data itself, right? Like what is their end goal? That was one of the things I'm like, is this just like bragging rights? You're just trying to get some press.
Yeah.
Uh, by the time it's being publicly disclosed, that usually means it's no longer monetizable. So that
Mhm.
may, in a way, lend itself to being in a good place. But I want to go to the front end of the process, if I may. Like, definitely agree with you in instant response, but let's talk about the front end of the process.
Mhm.
When someone, Amazon, let's just pick an Amazon. Amazon looked at this data. They verified that this data was leaked as part of their third party transfer, and it looked like it was, a third party transfer that would be something like healthcare, like dental records or vision, right? One of these things where I'm transferring these records to a third party who's going to do some processing.
I think there's property management company too, or something like
Property
that. Yeah, yeah,
management,
exactly.
yeah, right. These types of third parties. And so the other side that I would say is when we have new architectures coming on, property management, healthcare, what have you, uh, really digging into the architecture and figuring out like how are these files going to be exchanged? How are they going to be encrypted? How are they going to be protected? Because I would wager what happened there was Amazon was using MOVEit, figured it was secure, had the files in clear text,
Yes.
wasn't doing key exchange. So when something happens, we really have no protection. So if you are an organization that has a security architecture function, I do, like all projects come before an architecture review board and a CAB, two separate functions. This is what I'm thinking about. How do I inject more of those requirements into the architecture
Mhm.
reviews so that we can hopefully get ahead of the next move it or whatever major file transfer compromise we're looking at?
Yeah, so thinking about things like we're going to encrypt that data, even though it's supposed to be in a secured tunnel and okay, right? We're still going to encrypt that because then we have more control over that and then send it through. So it's like double encrypted, I guess you could say.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the thing that's on my mind. The other thing that I thought about with this is your point about what's in this. Like if I wanted to social engineer a company,
Hmm.
what better way to say, oh yeah, I'm Joe, I'm
Yes.
Alice, my peer is, Jane. Can you please help me reset? I've got passwordless, but I really just need to have SMS on my phone, right? I
Yep.
mean, this is like a treasure trove for anyone who wants to do account compromise or help desk, service desk
Yep.
compromise.
And you have those legitimate titles in here as well, right? So you're not making stuff up or grabbing at straws necessarily, right? And there's bound to have been attrition since 2023 in these companies. And so you could get lucky with, I'm the new blah blah blah, right? And I'm having trouble getting online. I wasn't fully onboarded. There's all of these pretexts that you could come up with to do
Right.
this.
JT says it's defense in depth. Any thoughts on that? I mean, pretty straightforward, but
Yeah, having multiple layers of controls and defense, I think, serves us well. Even as we move to like these zero trust models, right? It still behooves us to have multiple layers of things like encrypting the file before we transmit it, even though it's supposed to be encrypted in transit using this platform that we don't know, we don't have control over it, right? You need to retain some of that control.
And I sometimes get a little bit twingy when people say defense in depth because sometimes that can be just like shorthand for just keep adding controls. So it's
Yes,
it's
you're right.
absolutely defense in depth, but it's against a specific scenario, right? And in this scenario, we've got a file transfer, we got an adversary compromises that. What is
Threat
what is
modeling.
our backup and redundant controls along that attack?
Hmm.
So yes, but channeling our friend, Showstack, I would say yes, but defense in depth apply to a very specific threat model
Yeah.
that abstracts what we've seen here and move it.
Yeah.
right
Yeah,
on.
do that threat modeling, identify those points where it makes sense to add additional layers of control or of controls, but don't just like use it as a across the board, right? We need all of these, friction points because that's what defense controls are, right? They're friction points. And if we're adding too many of those, then we slow the business down unnecessarily.
Yeah.
Right on. Awesome. Well, let's move to topic two. Wolf, do you want to take first crack at this one? North Korean hackers targeting macOS.
Sure. So let's start off with the simple part, and I think all of us on the phone know this, but I use this in a session yesterday. So I was in a session yesterday with state and local government as part of the information sharing center, and we're having a conversation. I use this as an example because so many people still to this day think, oh, I'm safe. I don't run Windows. I'm a school, I'm a dev company, I'm a government, whatever it is. I use MacBooks, and therefore nothing can attack me
It's
because
the old Linux argument, right? I use
yeah.
Linux. I don't need AV. I'm good.
And I'll tell you, like I get it. Like only 6% of the malware hits MacBooks. But this was a really good example of a very targeted attack against an organization using this type of malware. Now, what they're doing is this particular threat actor out of North Korea, they target financial services firms, they target specifically cryptocurrency. And so what they did is they realized a lot of the crypto bros run MacBooks. Therefore, I shall create a shell malware that runs on a MacBook. And to sort of cover my tracks, they registered a URL that looks like a cryptocurrency exchange. It's got enough meat there that if your typical level one analyst saw it, they go, oh yeah, it's just people doing their job. And then they bundled this and sent it out. Now, Jamf has the analysis of it. I thought it was a really good in-depth analysis. One of the things I thought was kind of funny is they poke a little bit of fun in it. Like it's written Objective-C. Jessica, I don't know your dev background. My dev background is way aging. Yeah, okay.
Mine's zero. Yeah. Mine is
But
non-existent.
I was looking at this and it's like I could have wrote this, like maybe with help with ChatGPT or Copilot, but
Hmm.
it's the this isn't super smart, super evasive malware. So that brings up another security principle I think we oftentimes forget, which is we tend to think adversaries are going to be more advanced than they really are because APT
Mm,
has advanced in the name, but they're
yeah,
only going to be as advanced as the controls require. And if your typical cryptocurrency
right.
team runs no MacBooks, they're not going to spend a ton of time on writing some uber cool shell when just something in Objective-C will cover the basis.
Yeah, I mean, like our friend Jake says, right? They're not going to burn a 0 day when they don't have to, right? That's very costly to do that. They're going to, minimum viable product from an APT perspective. They're going to do just what they have to get in there.
Like MVP shell. That's what they
Yeah.
should call it, not anything else. The campaign is called Rust Bucket, which I kind of love. It's got a great name. I don't know who named that one, but I am a fan of cool names.
Yeah.
And this campaign really is targeted at siphoning out money out of US companies. The number I found online was more than $3 billion in cryptocurrency they had stolen.
Oh.
So guard your MacBooks.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that, right? Like, how do we help our organizations um, guard their MacBooks better and their fleets? And I think there's more and more MacBooks out there.
Well, certainly this is put out by Jamf for a reason, right? So,
Hmm. Of
Jamf is going to be touting what they do on the
course.
VM side.
Good.
You can do a vendor comparison. I'm not going to vote for any one vendor. I think the EDR space has gotten better on the MacBook as well. So
Hmm.
EDR, XDR on that side. Privilege management, this is one I go back and forth on. So if you would ask me, Jessica, like 5 years ago, like, hey, should you put Beyond Trust or Thycotic or Delinea
Hmm.
on my Mac? I was like, no, please don't. There's Linux tools you can run. And my previous org, that's exactly how we did it. We had specific tools that would stop new executables. I'm kind of
Hmm.
getting to the point where I'm like, yeah, it's about time. If you're doing
Makes
endpoint
sense.
privilege management, do it on those MacBooks.
Hmm. Hmm.
What am I missing?
Yeah. Yeah. And then I mean, I guess from a defense perspective, right? If we're talking blue team, things that we can do as a detective control instead of a preventive control is, you know, well, one thing we can do also as a preventive control is block newly registered domains. Because I think part of this attack included newly registered domains that were made to look like a legitimate crypto exchange, right? Or a legitimate crypto company. And so Um, a lot of solutions. Cato, Zscaler, name your, provider here, have the ability to say, no, you can't go to a newly registered domain, right? It doesn't have enough reputation yet. These things tend to be shady. And then, then start monitoring from a security operations perspective on, do we have, hits on these newly registered domains, and maybe we need to do some threat hunting and dig into this a little bit.
And, back to like first principles and things I say way too often on this call and others, all a good security control does, right? All a better mousetrap does is breed better mice. So
Mm-hmm.
do that now, but also back to the thinking about attacks and defense in depth against the scenario, recognize that the minute all of us or a significant portion of us are looking for new domains, adversaries are going to sit on domains and bypass that. So that only buys us some time.
Yes, it does. Right. It's not a permanent solution by any means.
Do it. We should do it,
Yeah.
right? But don't
Yeah.
know that people are going to work around that eventually.
Yeah. Don't be nihilist and be like, well, it doesn't matter anyway.
Well, that's what I always hear, like on the MFA,
Yeah.
like, "Oh, don't worry about it, SMS. People break." Yes, I
Yeah.
know, but
I know. It's a step forward. Yeah.
the other thing I wondered, Jessica, and I don't know. I've got a good answer for this. So back to being nihilistic.
Yeah.
How I don't know that in any of the firms that I've had a SOC,
Uh-huh.
my level one people would not be fooled by this because what do? You look at the traffic, an alert happens, you go to the website. If the website looks legit, you mark it as a false positive, you move on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And that comes with, training our folks, but a level one person by definition, right, is never going to be as advanced or knowledgeable or experienced as some of those level two, level three people, who might, get that spidey sense, because I think a lot of us in cyber and particularly in defense, positions, we develop that spidey sense over time where it's like, something's not right here. And a level one analyst may not have that yet. I think it goes back to preventive controls to make it uh, harder for to hit those newly registered domains first, and then it goes to our more advanced defenders to do threat hunting and those kinds of things.
So one of the things that I've seen implemented in the past is you do a sampling, right? So for like
Mm-hmm.
one in every 10 closed tickets as a false positive, you pop back out and you escalate to your
Yep.
team or your L2. That might be a way to detect this.
Yep.
And simply having the conversation with your L1. Hey guys, like I know we're speed, we're feed. Our whole goal is velocity, but you should be aware that this is an issue. The question is, this is where I hope AI can help us triage. I would love to say yes, but my gut says no. Because one of the things that we're finding,
Mm-hmm.
especially with prompt engineering and AI social engineering, is humans are storytelling machines. What most phishing and most compromise, this is a good example, right? The story is someone is looking at a website that's crypto, which you expect. If you fall into that story, you can get conned. If you look at the
Mm-hmm.
crux of any con, that's what happens. Similarly, with LLMs, if you can get them convinced of the story, they too can be convinced and overlook things.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
don't know that AI can help. Machine learning on the packets and analysis, like if you actually look at the data that was sent across, there is some very clear evidence that this is not like someone clicking. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
ML side on the traffic pattern would pick this up with anomaly detection, but I don't know like a lot of the emerging like security copilot stuff. I don't think you
Yeah. Probably more of the machine learning, less of the large language model type stuff, right? Because I think a lot of people today use AI as shorthand for LLM when AI actually encompasses this much broader set of disciplines.
speaking of falling for the stories, that was the story in my head. So you called it.
I can read your mind, Wolf.
That's spooky.
Awesome. All right, let's go on. Anything else on that one, or you feel good?
No, I think we're good there.
All right, let's keep moving. Well, if you want to give me the first take on these TSA rules, I know we wrote about these earlier this week or last week, I think a little bit, but yeah, what's the latest here?
So I'll tell you why. I'll tell you two things that really stuck out at me about the TS rules. First was I believe in both this first story and this last story that what we're really seeing in cybersecurity is the need to think on a longer time span. And it's not something
Mm-hmm.
that's very easy for humans. Jessica, to your point, like we're good in like an hour, a 2 hour, a day. We're really, as people, not very good at a year or 5 years. And a lot of these requirements go back to Colonial Pipeline in 21, right? This has been
Mm-hmm.
3 years plus in the making before we actually see some controls. So I think both of those remind me that we need to be thinking on a longer time horizon.
Yeah. Yep.
Other thing is, whenever I see railroads, like the origin for hacker, as many of us know, Model Railroad Club in MIT. So I'm always excited whenever I see a story about railroads. And so when we're talking about like what to include, I'm like, we've got to cover the trains.
Yeah. Choo choo.
So what the TSA does now that this is important, right? There's the proposed rule and then there's the final rule. This is the
Yep.
proposed rule. This is open for discussion. What they've done is they have issued a series of mandates for owner operators. This is anyone who's doing rail, uh, definitely air travel as well, but predominantly rail and pipe. That's an owner operator transporting materials, right, that are covered within the auspices of TSA. So think oil, fuel, other materials. They propose rules that really, I would almost argue, do belong in 2021 because they're like, hey, have good access controls, have a plan
What?
to segregate. I know it's wild. Segregate your IT and OT. This is another thing that we've been talking about forever, the Purdue reference model, right?
Yep.
Use strong authentication. So the requirements are nothing wild. If you go and take a look at them, you're like, yeah, this is exactly what I would imagine a good security
Mm-hmm.
team would have.
Mm-hmm.
But much like we saw the EPA with water, a lot of these agencies have not to date codified really good practices.
And they aren't always incented to do so, right? And it's not like you can just snap your fingers and implement this. This is a multi-year implementation and transformation of your environment, right? And so you have to sell it initially to get the investment to do it, even if there's a rule, right? And with the Chevron ruling, I don't know if this will, it could come up with, a bunch of lawsuits and make it all the way to Supreme Court, and they could be like, yeah, no, there isn't legislation that actually says this.
Yes.
TSA, your rule is bunk, right? So I think there's a lot of things going on here that we have to take under consideration. And so if you're one of these organizations that will be impacted by this, first of all, it's open for comment right now. So go read it and provide your perspective and your input on that. But then start thinking about what this transformation would look like and what kind of investment you would need and how long it'll take. But also keep in mind that Chevron ruling in the back of your head. A lot of these, I could see these big companies, throwing lawyers and litigation at this.
Well, the TSA's estimate is a $2 billion implementation for this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Yeah.
not
Pocket
an
change, rounding error, right?
so right now it's open for comment. Um, if you are in an adjacent industry and you're trying to figure out like what a good cybersecurity program would look
Mm-hmm.
like, this is good fodder and good
Mm-hmm.
documentation for you. Once it's approved, assuming it is, organizations will have 90 days. Owner operators who fall under the auspices, again, rail and pipe predominantly, will have 90 days to come back with their cyber security operational implementation plan. I have never been able to write any good plan in 90 days. So
Mm-hmm.
if you are under this, I would highly encourage you start the plan today.
Yep.
If it doesn't pass, now you've got a good plan for what your security might look like. And if it does pass,
Yep.
now you've got a head start.
Yep. Well, and the other thing I'd keep in mind is, if you're not directly beholden to this, so hello, my company does software for the oil and gas industry, right? I imagine that our clients are going to start providing us with vendor questionnaires
Yeah.
asking the questions about how we can help them comply, right? Or how we will not make them in non-compliance and in violation of this stuff. And so if you're in a, complementary or supporting kind of company for these that will be beholden, start thinking about how it may impact you. I mean, don't go, oh, I don't deal with pipeline. I don't deal, I'm not a pipeline. I don't run rail, right? But do you provide a service or something like that to a company that does, or an organization that does?
Yeah, I know the CISA CERCIA rules coming out for critical infrastructure. That
Yep.
that impacts providers, service providers too, right?
Right.
So it's like
We're impacted
this
by it,
is,
right? Yeah.
this is a pretty limited TSA set of rules, sorry, for certain companies, but those new CISA rules coming down, affect
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people, and they're kind of
Yeah.
similar, right?
Yep.
And we're going to see, to Jessica's point, we're going to see this rolling wave of all these being translated into vendor requirements, being audited on
Yes.
the chain,
Yes.
as always
Yes.
happens.
Yes. And there's going to be inconsistency around the rules. And so then you have to do this, dance. And yeah.
Yeah, yeah, right on. Awesome. Any final thoughts from either of you? We have a couple of minutes left, but Wolf, I'll start with you on any of the stories or kind of anything else that you're seeing.
I really briefly touched on it, but on this last one, if you have OT responsibilities, right? Like I've got OT in my environment, as you might imagine, with water and everything else. If you got OT responsibilities, even if you're not directly affected, it's really worth looking at this and looking at other guidance coming out of CISA to get ahead of these.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, the other thing is, I really want to double down on what Wolf said and what I kind of mentioned at the beginning of really needing to start thinking about that longer time horizon and how we're going to do monitoring and detection of things that are, a year or more after the initial problem, right? I think with the Avanti stuff, we're probably, my favorite topic for tech briefings, as you all know. We're going to start seeing more and more of this on this longer time horizon. And so how, what do we have in place? What processes do we have in place? What do we need to put in place to do some of this, longer term monitoring and response?
I got a CISA email on Avante, and Jessica, you were the first person I thought of. I said, "Aw, Jessica's favorite topic."
They're gonna start referring to me in the things, right? They're gonna be like, "Here you go, Jess."
Yeah, it's the heads
Your
up, we're
favorite
back.
topic.
But I have been giving this a lot of thought, and I know we only have another minute, and so I don't have a good codified answer yet. But like daily stand-ups are really aimed at
Yeah.
what's happening right now, right? Retros are really aimed at what's happening in that past couple weeks. The Agile and the Scrum methodology that has really helped us iterate and improve so many aspects has left us very ill prepared to handle these longer term looming threats.
Yes.
And I don't
Yes.
know yet. Like maybe this is a separate Kanban board. I'm still thinking in terms of agile against stories, but I don't know yet how to do this. But this is something that
Hmm.
I have been thinking a lot about. Is having that sort of standing thematic room where you're keeping an eye on these slow burning issues.
Yeah, for sure.
Right on. Awesome. Well, Wolf and Jessica, thanks so much as always. Really appreciate the time today. And yeah, let's do this again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Cool.
Have a good one.
All right, guys.
Okay, see you later. Bye.
Take care. See ya.